Hello, and welcome to What Are the Odds? In today's video, we will discuss the likelihood that the events are to be repeated in Memento. We will use another split to determine the answer. We will focus on the key events of the movie, ignoring inconsequential or insignificant ones, or events with the sole purpose of becoming factors for other events. If something is of high probability, we will also ignore its impact. After we've determined the key events in the story structure, we will use those for the final events odds. The film follows Leonard, who suffers from severe short-term memory loss. To combat his faulty memories, he's taken to writing his thoughts on himself. Memento doesn't follow a chronological structure, and we will follow the events in the order they are presented. Later, when we determine the film's inciting incident, we will follow the events in chronological order. Leonard wakes in a hotel room with no idea how long he's been staying there. He meets up with Teddy, and they visit a sketchy building. There, Leonard kills Teddy. Before meeting with Teddy, Leonard talks to Bert, who works at the discount inn. The previous day, Leonard meets with Natalie to get information. She had her friend at the DMV trace the license plate to reveal John G's identity. Before that, Leonard eats lunch with Teddy. Afterwards, Leonard finds out, however briefly, that Bert had him rent multiple rooms. That morning, Leonard wakes up next to Natalie. She discusses running John G's plate. Late last night, Leonard visits Natalie. She reveals that some guy named Teddy killed her boyfriend Jimmy. Leonard wakes in the hotel room. Dodd is tied up in his closet when Teddy shows up. They end up letting him go, with a warning. Leonard is in the washroom with a bottle of alcohol. He takes a shower and finds Dodd has entered. They fight, and Leonard ends up incapacitating him. He calls Teddy for help. Leonard gets away from Dodd and goes to the apartment where Dodd is staying. He brings a bottle into the washroom as a weapon. Dodd tracks Leonard down. That morning, Teddy surprises Leonard in his car. Teddy tells Leonard that Natalie cannot be trusted. Teddy gets him to write "Do not trust her" on Natalie's photo. Leonard doesn't trust Teddy, however, and quickly scratches the words out. He does take his advice on where to stay, at the discount inn. Back at Natalie's, Natalie comes in telling Leonard that she was beaten up by Dodd. Earlier, Natalie mentions that Dodd wants to know what happened to Jimmy and his money. Natalie admits that she is going to manipulate and use Leonard to get what she wants. Leonard beats up Natalie. Earlier, Leonard had told Natalie what he can recall from the night his wife was murdered. Something woke him up. He heard muffled screams from the bathroom and grabbed a gun. When he walked in, the murderer was strangling his wife. Leonard shot the perpetrator, but got his head smashed into the mirror and fell to the floor. Leonard meets Natalie at the bar she works at. He found a note in his pocket telling him to meet her there. In the middle of getting yet another tattoo, Teddy barges in and explains that some cop is messing with Leonard, looking for Jimmy G. Leonard meets with the cop, Officer Gamble, who is actually undercover as Teddy. Leonard drives to the same building where he would later kill Teddy. Jimmy Grants arrives shortly after. Leonard attacks him. He takes his clothes and car. Teddy shows up and explains that the real John G is already dead. In fact, Leonard's wife survived the assault, didn't believe in Leonard's condition, and killed herself by having Leonard dose her with insulin too many times as a test. Teddy reveals that he's been helping Leonard track down John G's all over the place. Essentially, the killer, Leonard, has already slain. Leonard purposefully forgets what Teddy tells him. There we go, the inciting incident. Without this occurring, Leonard wouldn't have went on his quest to ultimately kill John G. or Teddy. We will use the factors of each event to help determine the odds of the successful outcome of each. Factors and events that were in place before the inciting incident occurred will be taken as facts of the world. They are simply part of the world's initial conditions. We will work our way through the events now in chronological order. With his stolen car and Teddy on his tail, Leonard finds a tattoo parlor and gets John's license plate tattooed on his arm. John barges in and wants to talk with Leonard. Leonard, of course, doesn't recognize him. Event number 1, Leonard goes to meet Natalie at the bar. Factors include Leonard trusting the note found in his pocket. Leonard normally only trusts his own handwriting when it comes to written notes. However, he assumes he was given a note to meet with Natalie. Either way, Leonard leads a structured life, and meeting with someone he doesn't know seems like a risk. If he had known who it was, he'd most likely have a picture of them or some other note to corroborate the one in his pocket. Event number 2, Natalie convinces Leonard to take care of Dodd. Factors include Natalie's manipulation and the bruise she receives from Leonard. Event number 3, Leonard captures Dodd. Factors include Dodd finding Leonard and Leonard getting the better of Dodd in the bathroom. Teddy and Leonard end up letting Dodd go. Not that Leonard would remember that anyways. Leonard visits Natalie and gets fed her sob story. In the morning, they arrange their meeting at lunch. Event number 4, meeting with Natalie for information, primarily John's identification. Ultimately, Leonard will kill John because of this. This film's final event is that Leonard kills John Gamble, also known as Teddy. Only the factors that have led up to this moment will be considered. Events that did not contribute will be ignored. Factors include Leonard meeting Natalie, Natalie manipulating Leonard, Leonard capturing Dodd, and Leonard receiving information from Natalie. As for the reasons, the fact that Leonard forgets everything that happened essentially refreshes his internal state of mind every few minutes. While this doesn't completely negate prior events and their consequences, it does render most of them fruitless. There are several key events throughout the film, but some of their results largely don't affect the final outcome. We'll assume that John sticks by long enough for one of 3 things to happen. Leonard is finally convinced by John and leaves. John finds out that he is Leonard's next target and makes alternate plans to avoid Leonard's lethal plans. And Leonard kills John. For the last option to become reality, Natalie is an important resource, not only because she provides Leonard with information, but because she becomes someone Leonard prefers over John. Without Natalie's contributions and manipulation, Leonard likely isn't successful. Natalie feeds into Leonard's obsessions and propels him in worrying directions, while John, knowing that Leonard's target is already dealt with, wishes for Leonard to move on with his life. A near impossible task, given that he is unable to make and build upon new experiences that will help him properly heal and grieve. For that reason, it seems Natalie's involvement is necessary. All the events that are crucial to the ending involve her. Information, obsession, guilt, progression. With that in mind, it's time to determine how likely it was for Leonard to kill John. First, I'll discuss Leonard and Natalie's initial meeting. Factors include Leonard finding and trusting the note. Now this is simply a matter of when Leonard finds the coaster with the note. Given he primarily trusts his own writing, I'm positive that Leonard would find it hard to trust in other types of notes, no matter the circumstance. He relies solely on the words, but what if the note was merely slipped into his pocket by an unsavory individual? The words don't particularly matter, just that they came from someone named Natalie. Therefore, I'll break this event in 2, the odds Leonard finds the note at the optimal time, and the odds that he trusts it. Now, the chances that he rummaged through his pockets are quite high. Given his memory problems, he does so often. If he had found the note before he'd forgotten he'd slipped on Jimmy's clothes and taken his car, there's a good chance he would have just tossed the coaster. Not only would it be foolish to listen to the note, it has nothing to do with him or his investigation. Therefore, the odds he finds it after he forgets will be how likely it is that he checked his pockets. He usually checks his pockets when he needs something and believes it to be on his person. However, he was in a rush to get a tattoo, not in need of anything, and had no immediate concern regarding the content of his pockets. Considering all those factors, I will designate the odds as 9 out of 10 that he checks his pockets at the right time. Now, what about the chances he trusts the note? Leonard is usually very cautious and nearly solely trusts his own writing. Had he doubted the note in any fashion, I'm sure he wouldn't have been as trusting with Natalie. I'll assume he could think of any of the reasons to doubt the note with the same probabilities. The note was perhaps slipped inside his coat pocket, the note's worth has expired, or the note was acquired in an untrustworthy manner, and he can't trust the note because he hadn't written anything else about it. Given how persistent and diligent his note-taking is, he certainly would have written more information regarding the meetup. Odds 1 in 4. Section total 9 out of 40. Next, their subsequent arrangements. Factors include Natalie taking Leonard home and using him. What are the odds that Leonard forgets his purpose for being there and leaves? Now, there is no set time for Leonard's resetting memory. He does indeed refresh in the middle of his visit at the Ferdy's bar, and he hadn't yet spent much time there. For that reason, I'll have to assume he made some kind of note to the effect like, find Natalie and figure this out. Therefore, I'm sure he would have made it to the bar. Natalie had no reason to reveal that the note was hers, or help Leonard. However, she saw his mental handicap as something she could exploit. Therefore, the moment she takes him home is one in which she's decided Leonard is valuable as a tool, and one and the same in terms of factors. Given the limited information regarding her situation and personality, I'll leave the odds at a 1 out of 2, simply whether or not Natalie uses Leonard to her advantage. The Dodd altercation. Factors include Dodd finding Leonard and Leonard taking down Dodd. If Dodd had gotten the better of Leonard, he'd have likely been killed. For this reason, we'll treat this event as merely a way for Leonard to progress with Natalie and nothing else. All that needs to occur is for Leonard not to be killed. Again, this event will be broken into two. The likelihood that Dodd finds Leonard in a reasonable time to trigger the rest of the events, and the odds that Leonard takes Dodd down. All Natalie says is that she's told Dodd about the car. I believe this to be untrue. I don't think any such conversation took place. We have to consider that Dodd is already on the lookout for Jimmy's vehicle. Due to that, and the fact Dodd is probably circling the area around Ferdy's bar, he is likely covering an area with a radius equal to the distance between the Mount Crest Inn, where he is staying, and the bar, that being 17 kilometers. To get the area, we use the formula for the area of a circle. Area equals pi r squared. That is equal to 908 kilometers squared. How long does it take Dodd to sweep this area in search of Jimmy's vehicle? He merely has to come across it on the side of the road. Considering this, we'll say he has a few days before the situation escalates. We'll determine he has an average speed of 10 kilometers an hour, factored in with stoppages and red lights. This also includes time taken walking around in areas he'd expect to find Leonard. To solve for time, we'll take time equals distance over speed. If we conceptualize the circle as a square and round down the 908 kilometers squared to 900 kilometers squared, we can imagine that Dodd could race down lines of 30 kilometers at a time 30 times over, which adds back up to 900, which is why I'll simply take 908 kilometers squared, the area, as the distance he has to cover. This of course assumes that Dodd theoretically covers a range of 1 kilometer as he travels, or that there is 1 kilometer minus his actual range of dead space. Dead space being the area that neither Dodd nor Leonard can be, and therefore does not need to be checked, like private spaces or restricted areas. 908 kilometers divided by 10 kilometers an hour is 90.8 hours. 90.8 hours works out to 3.78 days. Therefore, in one day he can cover 1 over 3.78 or 100 over 378, which reduces to 50 over 189. That means he can cover approximately 26.4% of the area each day. Although Leonard's position is its own variable, we'll say that in essence his position is static. Think about it like this. Both Dodd and Leonard move within this circle. I've simplified the problem by saying Leonard's relative position to Dodd never changes. For example, like leaving the circle. We'll take this to mean the odds Dodd encounters Leonard in just one day to be 26.4% or 33 out of 125. Next, whether or not Leonard takes down Dodd will be 1 out of 2. Both were taken by surprise that Leonard was taking a shower in Dodd's room. Section total 33 over 250. Natalie's information. Factors include Natalie helping Leonard. How likely is it for Natalie to keep her promise to a man that would forget she's ever made one in the first place? Again, there's limited resources to pull from in regards to how likely she is to act. Odds 1 and 2. Just whether or not she supplies Leonard with accurate information, or nothing at all. Multiplied together, the odds that the final event, Leonard killing John, occurring, becomes 9 over 40 times 1 out of 2 times 33 over 250 times 1 out of 2 equal to 297 over 40,000. Well, now we know if you were to travel to a random split with the exact same necessary initial conditions, the likelihood that you'd see these same events transpire and the successful outcome of the final event is 0.74%.